So we're going to talk about the proposed big beautiful bill, and you can decide for yourself if it's beautiful or ugly. It's also been called the big ugly bill by its detractors, of which I am mostly one, to be fair. But I did really take an objective look at this. The only reason that I don't like it is because the things that it's trying to do seem like they're actually counterproductive to what they say they're trying to do. And I look at that as I'm going to assume the best and say that I think the people who wrote it really believed that they were saving money where they thought they were going to save money, but I think that ultimately they ended up costing us more money as taxpayers, and I'll go into why I think that. Let me get the slide notes up. Bear with me. I have way too many windows open. All right, here we go. That's why I was on the other screen. All right, so um, this is a huge restructuring of government priorities. It touches on housing, climate, education, and the legal system in some very serious ways. So first of all, there are major cuts to the HUD program. Basically, Section 8 rent subsidies are cut by $700 million. Those are for people who are lower income folks. The home investing funding is cut by 70%. Fair housing grants, layoffs expected at HUD and agency HQ might be sold for the HUD. There are community development and rental assistance programs that'll be eliminated, and it's basically following the exact budget that the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 playbook asks for. So Trump disavowed himself of Project 2025 when he was running for election. You'll see tonight that everything going on here seems to be very aligned with Project 2025 and seems to be an acceleration of what was originally planned. Um, we should have another event on Project 2025 and what it outlines in the long-term vision. So I'm going to add a note to myself to do that. Um, and I'll talk a little bit about it tonight, but not hit it head on. So let's talk about the potential increase in homelessness for all these poor people that are no longer going to have rental assistance. We're talking about a loss of, and I'm sorry for the lack of commas. We're talking about 450,000 to 1.3 million people who lose rental assistance, 250,000 cuts to shelter and supportive housing. The total number of homelessness will be between 700,000 to 1.6 million people that will become homeless because of Trump's bill if this passes the House. So we would essentially more than double, potentially almost triple the number of homeless people in the USA with just this one bill. I will say it's very effective. I just don't agree with what it's doing. Now, there are currently 260,000 unsheltered people who have no roof to sleep under, and which is about 40% of the current homeless. Now, given that this will take away many shelters, it's estimated that 1.4 to 2.2 million people will literally live with no roofs over their heads when this bill passes, whereas right now we're at 260,000. So we're almost 10xing the number of people that have nowhere to sleep and nowhere to live and no place to call home, even a temporary home for the night that protects them from the cold of winter. For those of us on the East Coast, Californians have nicer weather. But for those of us on the East Coast, the winter can be brutal if you have nowhere to sleep. So
Garrett, quick question. Where do you get the data from? Like the data that you have
Wait,
on the slides,
So
where
all
are
of
they
all
from?
of the all of the slides I have sources for, and I'll post them. I can actually post them because Jess, I think you would love to do fact checking while we're doing this, and I'm gonna.
Yeah, yeah. Like I just looked up, is beautiful bill gonna cut funding for HUD? And it said no. There's no funding cut at all.
Well, I will give you the. I'll give
Yeah.
you the. Oh, whoops, that was to you privately. Let me put it in the chat. Let me make sure that it's on share.
And just to clarify, rental assistance doesn't come from
wait a
HUD, it
minute.
comes from your state. Because I
Yeah, they
I
were
Wait a
both.
minute.
assisted with
They
rental
were.
assistance during
Yeah,
COVID.
we just we take questions at the end, but actually these are separate cuts. So rental assistance section 8 is rental assistance. There are different and I think you might have a misunderstanding about that. So but let me just make sure that you have access to the share. And do you have access to it now, Jess?
Did you say you put it in the chat?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, yeah, I'll have a look.
I thought there were going to be questions after this presentation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the request has always been that people want questions after the presentation.
Yeah, yeah.
Jess,
Maybe
I'm going to
then
ask
we'll
you
we'll
to
be able to see a picture of Jess.
please no more interruptions.
All right.
Garrett
So
worked hard on this.
Garrett, excuse me, this is Christine. I just would like to say something very quickly.
please, quick.
There seems to be a little bit of bullying going on here with respect to constant asking of Jess to show herself, to go on video. People have a number of reasons for perhaps not wanting to be on video. One of the reasons I have is I'm blind and I can't see you when you're on video. So sometimes I don't
Ooh.
want to be on video because to me, I'm not seeing you, I'm hearing you, you're hearing me. But regardless of that, people may have whatever reasons they have for not being on video. Jess said she's cooking. So she doesn't want to be on video while she's
Yeah,
cooking. And
Christine,
I
Christine,
think that this idea of
I hear you, Christine.
showing yourself two or
I,
three times already, it has been mentioned, and I think it
Christine,
needs to stop.
I hear you, Christine, and I agree that we shouldn't continue to ask, but I will say that we've had a lot of Zoom bombers, and when we ask them to turn on their videos, they don't. I'm not saying that Jess is a Zoom bomber, but it is a way to cut down on the level of, uh, you know, basically people will come in and say disruptive things or things that are absolutely not true or that are disrespectful. Jess has been absolutely respectful, so I agree we should be respectful to her. But I do also want her to cite her sources when she comes to the table in the Q&A.
Absolutely.
So that said, let me go to the next slide. Oh, we did that. So the estimates not only reflect federal level HUD cuts. These estimates reflect only federal level HUD cuts, not state or local reductions, which would amplify the crisis. With more people on the streets, you can expect health emergency, public costs, and strain on local systems. Now, before condemning it as an inevitable crisis, I want everyone to understand that this is a direct policy-driven surge and very preventable. Simply by not passing the bill, we will prevent those very large number of people from becoming homeless. In fact, today, 53% of people know someone who's homeless. 53% of people in the US. If this bill passes, the chances are good that 23% more people will know someone that's homeless, which is putting the amount to three-quarters of Americans knowing someone that's homeless and having a government that doesn't seem to care enough about them to put a roof over their head, which seems very unethical in the wealthiest country in the world when we're giving huge tax breaks to people who are extremely wealthy. And we'll talk more about that later. So, homeless people are desperate to survive. And what is not in this bill that I think should be is that, what happens to homeless people when they have no way to make money? And if you look at it, the chances are good that they're going to, not worry about committing crimes. And actually, the science shows that homeless people are far more likely to commit crimes because let's face it, what's their punishment? It's going to jail where they get a roof over their head, they get free food, and, protection against the people who would step on them in the street, right? So, long story said, let's talk a little bit about the hidden costs of homelessness. So 3.6 to 5.7 million additional arrests for crimes will be committed, and probably a higher level of crimes committed because not everyone gets caught. That's the number of expected arrests. This is about 1 to 2 crimes for each 100 people in the country that will be committed because of this bill passing. So the chances are good you'll know someone who will be a victim of a crime that caused by this bill if it passes. The cost per homeless person of this crime arrest jail cycle is about $83,000 a year. Interestingly, the cost of housing these people is about $13,000 a year. So actually, it costs way more to make these people homeless than it does to house them in the criminal justice system. So then you want to consider that when homeless people go to the hospital, the expense is put on the taxpayer to help them, right? Because it's inhumane to not treat someone that's at death's door. but preventative care is far cheaper than the emergency care that they would get in the hospital. So between emergency medical care and the criminal justice system, the overall average is and the cost per criminal per crime arrest jail cycle is only for the people who are committing crimes, which isn't everyone, but it's something like 500 times more likely that someone will commit a crime if they're homeless than if they're not. And you can see why, because the incentives aren't there to, scare them away from jail. Now, not that jail's a great place, right? But being homeless isn't a great place either. So it doesn't look quite as bad if you're a homeless person. Now, the average cost for everybody, for like across the entire population of people who have become homeless, including the ones that are the 83,000 per year, and the healthcare costs of everyone else, are between $30,000 and $50,000 per person per year. So what that means is that simply giving people houses would save us far more money than it's costing, and this is considered a savings. This isn't a savings, this is an additional cost, but it's being billed to the American people as if it's savings. It's not savings. Studies show that for every $1 spent on public housing, $1.80 is saved in tax dollars. So for every dollar Trump is saving, he's actually costing us $1.80 and claiming it as savings, which is, unfathomably unethical. And you guys are going to have to tell me in the Q&A whether or not Democrats are pointing this stuff out, because if they are, I just haven't been hearing it. And I'm perfectly happy to criticize both sides. Deborah, if you don't mind it, you can raise your hand, but I'm going to call on you after the presentation, if that's all right. Next, we're going to go to climate change. Enough about homelessness. We see that that's obviously not a good tax savings area. We're going to be losing money. Now let's talk about clean energy. Basically, clean energy credits will be repealed, risking about $500 billion in investment and 686,000 jobs. The EPA will be cut by 65%. Staff will be reduced to Reagan era levels, like long time ago. Programs like Energy Star, we've all seen when we shop for an appliance, Energy Star, which saves us money. Then those programs are going to be terminated. Climate equity efforts like freeway removals in Black communities are going to be eliminated. The USDA and NOAA climate research grants are drastically reduced. So let's look at the reality of climate change. I think the reason these things are happening is because the Republican Party doesn't believe climate change is real. And let me tell you a little bit of facts that we covered in another event on climate change in the FTI. Before mankind existed, the fastest that Earth's temperature went up by 1.5 degrees Celsius since Earth's formation, up until about 12,000 years ago, was in 33,000 years. Once humanity came on the Earth, it happened in 10 to 12,000 years ago. In 10 to 12,000 years, we went up 10 to 12,000 years ago, we went up 1.5 degrees Celsius over that 2,000 year period. Now, in the modern era, it's only taken 88 years to go up 1.5 degrees Celsius. So how do you argue that climate change isn't man-made when these numbers are put in front of you? But the problem is Democrats aren't the ones putting these numbers forward. Like climate change people aren't putting these numbers forward. But these are real numbers. You can fact check them. I would ask you I didn't put all the sources for this, but you can put this into ChatGPT. Actually, I realized it's actually a little harder to prompt this than I thought it was. So if people want to fact check this afterwards, we can do that. But it's researchable. Now, the next thing that the Big Ugly Bill does is it takes elite universities with large endowments and international students, and they face financial penalties. The endowment tax, which was 1.4% for when an endowment goes up because it's a place of higher education, it was a low tax, goes up to 21%, which is, a huge increase. International students are excluded from the student count, raising the tax burden. Now, public service loan forgiveness is revoked for employees at groups labeled as terrorist supporting. Mind you, people who are protesting in a school saying it's really bad for Gazan citizens to die are now being labeled as terrorist supporting. So when that's what we call a terrorist, quote unquote, like, I'm sorry, but I don't trust an administration that uses that label, when someone is saying that innocent people are being killed and that's bad, I don't buy that they're going to use this public service loan forgiveness as anything but a weapon. And that's what Trump has been doing, is weaponizing government, and this bill helps him do it in spades. So Pell Grant eligibility is tightened, and so let's go a little bit into why is Trump punishing the wealthiest and most prestigious universities? Well, because the educated people in the world don't agree with Trump's current political opinions. And Trump is basically trying to silence any opinions that disagree with his political party's narrative. It's really an attack on the First Amendment. This is an attack on free speech. Don't pretend that it's anything else. It's a very clear attack on free speech. And essentially, he's frozen billions of dollars of federal funding from top universities, including my alma mater, Cornell, and Harvard. Cornell's response was confusion. No reason was given for the federal funding cuts. Literally nothing. They just cut $1 billion without a word. And Cornell's like, what's going on? Harvard did even better. I'm actually really proud of Harvard. I kind of want to go there for grad school now, because what they did is they released a huge number of college courses in how to spot the rise of authoritarianism. And if you haven't been paying attention, if you didn't come to our event on Trump and his basically power grab for being a dictator, he is very much on the path to becoming a dictator, and he's moving very quickly in that direction. And if we don't put on the brakes as the people, then it's going to happen. And so we really have to do something about this, and that means taking action. So next thing, architecture and the humanities, not nonprofits. The Architecture League of New York, the NEH, the CUP lose funding. I'll go into a little bit more about the value of the social sciences in a minute. The Mellon Foundation did pledge some emergency funds to support the $15 million to support the affected organizations, but there's $650 million in cuts from the humanities. The corresponding reduction in federal revenues is $30 billion. Now, get that straight. Literally, you cut $650 million from the budget, and the government will lose $30 billion. So, and then the state and local taxes is even more. It's 76 to 80 billion. So these $650 million cuts are not saving us money as taxpayers at all. And yet the budget completely ignores the loss of federal revenue that's going to result from the cuts in the humanities. So it's not a cost-saving effort. It's an effort to silence the people with political opinions that don't agree with Trump. And it's very clear. This is not about liberal or conservative. I'm an independent. This is not liberal or conservative. This is about free speech. And Trump is very much trying to silence any voice that doesn't agree with his voice. And it's not Trump, by the way. I'm going to go into that later. It's really the Heritage Foundation behind all this. It's not Trump. He's a figurehead. So next thing, I held an event some time ago on why I think I held an event on this, on why the social sciences are actually more in need than the hard sciences. For those that either, I don't remember for sure if we had it, but we need to do it again, because if we did have it, we lost the video. So the TLDR, the too long didn't read, is that we're putting more power into the hands of more people by increasing knowledge extremely quickly with the effect of investing in the hard sciences, without the wisdom coming from how much power can each individual handle responsibly, which is what the soft sciences is supposed to do. Now, I will give the point that I think the soft sciences hasn't done a really good job of focusing on that particular issue, and it gets lost in a lot of other stuff. But I think the soft sciences is really needed to step up right now in terms of increasing the wisdom of society, in terms of knowing how much how much power can each individual handle responsibly. Now, too much knowledge without commensurate wisdom is extremely dangerous. Imagine someday that a depressed person that thinks that all human beings are better off dead has enough power to start nuclear war, or press some other button, create some horrible virus that's completely fatal and ends humanity, and can hit an end of the world button. When that person gets that power, well, we're all dead, right? And so, unfortunately, while we're not at that point now, we're getting to a point that 20, 30, 40 years from now, we may be there, and we're not heading in a direction to stave off that kind of threat. That said, I'm going to talk about the budget and 2025 and the reshaping of the courts, because this is perhaps one of the most concerning things. And if you aren't concerned already, you're going to be now. So I'll also be surprised if you're not concerned already. So consolidating executive power over legal interpretation. So essentially, Project 2025's mandate for leadership recommends eliminating or weakening the independence of agency legal councils like the EPA, the Department of Justice and Education, which Trump is very much doing, trying to get rid of the Department of Education. He's reasserting what's called unitary executive theory, which is basically a claim that the president has total control over the executive branch, including legal interpretation. This is what we talked about when I presented on whether or not Trump's trying to be a dictator. Unitary executive theory basically means that the president can do what he wants with the military and the police. The executive branch of government is the one that has all the force in the government. Now, there are three branches of government for those that didn't pay attention in high school. All right, I didn't pay a lot of attention either sometimes in my history class, but I did get a reasonably good grade. But the first side is Congress, right? Congress writes the laws. Then there's the judiciary. The judiciary interprets the laws to say whether or not someone is violating the laws. These folks are independent of the executive branch, whose sole job is to enforce what the judiciary says. The executive branch of government has no job to interpret the law at all. So really what's happening here when they're reasserting unitary executive theory, I'm going to call it what it is. Let the president be a dictator. That's absolutely it. That's what it means. It means the president gets to decide what he wants, because guess what? If Congress writes a law that the president doesn't like, he's just going to go, you know what, that's not how I interpret it. And if the judiciary says, well, you're interpreting it wrong, the president will go, you know what, I can ignore you. I'm the unitary executive authority. And so essentially what we're going to have is the dictatorship. So the first step in this process to give the president full power is to prevent other agencies from interpreting the laws independent of the White House. Now, the Office of Legal Counsel is intended to be the central hub for consolidating interpretation across the government, controlled by appointees loyal to the president. The independent commissions are intended to be restructured or defunded, which is what this bill is moving towards. Now, I think it's important to remember that we all have misunderstandings, right? Only by surrounding ourselves with people who can call out when we're making a mistake or have a misunderstanding do we get closer to the truth and fairness that those of us in the FTI strive for, along with most of the world, by the way, which I think these desires to seek truth and fairness are within all of us, including Trump supporters, by the way. And I think that by forcing independent agencies to comply with the president's interpretation of the law and consolidating all that power in one person, there's no one to question the president anymore. He won't be aware of his misunderstandings. And if you haven't seen this happen with Trump yet, please listen with an open mind, because it has happened many, many times. Trump has a lot of misunderstandings, and when people point them out, he punishes them. He doesn't say, wow, that was great. Thanks for pointing that out. I'm going to do better next time. He punishes them. And you can see it over and over again. His closest, most loyal advisors, when they point out one thing that he did wrong, they get punished and removed from his circle of influence. And so this is the Executive Order 14215 that we covered in the other event on Trump trying to become a dictator. And it removes the judicial branch's checks and balances of the president and basically lets him be a dictator. Now, covered that. So the other thing that it says in Project 2025 is that we're supposed to replace career civil servants who are apolitical with politically loyal appointees. And so government officials are supposed to be nonpartisan. Now, we all know we have our political opinions, right? You can clearly tell I have some political opinions. I do. And I'm not shy about them. And I don't try to hide them. And I don't try to pretend I'm someone that I'm not. I think it's important that we all be able to voice our political opinions and do it in a way that's polite. That's why we have the FTI community, is to politely discuss political opinions, not get emotionally laden with them. Now, as long as there's a mix of different people with different political opinions in government, no one political narrative completely takes over the government, preventing the checks and balances within the government across different parties. That's a good thing. Our founding fathers knew that their plans would cause gridlock. And the general idea is that's good for business because it creates predictability. And the thing that businesses don't like is unpredictability. And that's why when Trump started doing his tariff wars, the stock market plummeted because it was unpredictable. So the problem is, if you have only one political party, you no longer have the checks and balances of creating an apolitical voice within the government to have checks and balances between left and right and center. You don't get all those voices. You only get one voice, and you won't know when there's a misunderstanding within that voice. It's what we're dealing with in China right now, right? China has one political party, and no other political parties are allowed. Same thing in Russia, one political party, and anyone else who starts to threaten Putin gets executed or put in jail. Same thing in Turkey. It's happening all over. Do we want that to happen to our country? It is going on right now, whether we like it or not. Now, in a hugely ironic movement, Project 2025 calls nonpartisan civil servants the deep state that needs to be removed, and then plants and installs their own political loyalists, which are exactly what the deep state is supposed to be. So it's like, wait a minute, I'm going to remove what I call the deep state, which is actually the objective apolitical people, and then I'm going to put in my own political loyalists, which is really a deep state. So as usual, it's a case of projection where probably I'm going to again give them the benefit of the doubt. I think they probably think that these apolitical people are, crazy liberals or something. And so they need to put their people in to get some semblance of reason in the government. Now, there's also the possibility they just want power, 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 and that's possible too. So Trump supporters that I know believed in a meritocracy when we talked about DEI. When it turned out that DEI also supports a meritocracy, and it turns out that if this Trump policy of removing civil servant protections gets rid of meritocracy in the government laws. So the whole reason that the government has this political gridlock is to create a meritocracy where the most talented political um, employees are the ones that are promoted the most. Well, what Trump is trying to do is say, no, we're going to get rid of that meritocracy. We're going to remove people for political purposes, and we're going to put them in because of their politics, not because of their talent as administrators. So even the Trump supporters I know supported meritocracy. So please, I call on all the Trump supporters, if you support meritocracy, do not support that part of the bill at the very least, and say that it should be removed, because having a government that is only of one party is going to end up being bad for everybody unless you're a member of that party at the highest levels of government. And I will tell you what if you are not a student of history, start reading about what happens in Russia, what happens in China when you're not a member of the party in power and you're an average citizen, you get completely hosed. That's the polite way of saying it. You get, basically the short end of the stick. And that's what's going to happen to all of us if we're not in that select few political people. And to be honest, you'll be selling your soul if you end up there. So I don't recommend that. You may win in this life, but you're not going to win beyond it. And if you look at our event on reincarnation, the peer-reviewed science says we do reincarnate, and I think justice happens after we die, even if it doesn't happen during our life. So that said, I realize that's very woo-woo, but I have logical defenses of that argument. So as well as peer-reviewed science to back it up. So take a look at that if you don't believe me. Look at the evidence before you judge. So how does it work? The budget can't directly appoint judges, but Project 2025 pre-screens judicial candidates based on ideological loyalty. Trump would then use the Senate confirmation to fast-track the appointees into federal courts, courts of appeals, and possibly the Supreme Court if a vacancy arises. How does the fiscal year 2026 budget support this? Basically, during the DOJ civil rights and resistant units, Project 2025 calls for significant budget reductions to the Civil Rights Division and other independent enforcers. Without the internal checks, removal of resistance from within the DOJ gets harder. If you don't have objective people that will call out your wrongdoing, then the wrongdoing doesn't get called out. And this is where I criticized Obama quite a bit, even though I liked a lot of things that he did. He was horrible to whistleblowers. And we need to be able to have people who are whistleblowers that point out the wrongdoing of the government. And so this is where I'll criticize left and right when they do wrong. And I think Obama treated whistleblowers very poorly. That said, defunding the DOJ paves the way for loyalist judicial appointees to face far less institutional pushback, and that's not a good thing. Aligning the administrative law with conservative jurisprudence by basically reshaping the agency's priorities and ensuring new political appointees head them, legal interpretation across the executive shifts, and it's basically creating a favorable environment for conservative judiciary nominees who will reinforce the conservative ideology rather than challenging it. And again, gridlock is actually good. And I forgot to say the most important reason gridlock is good. The reason gridlock is good is because the only time something should pass as a law is if the majority, the vast majority of people agree with it. And if the vast majority of representatives, at least 60 out of 100 people in Congress or 65 out of 100 people in Congress don't agree with it, it shouldn't pass. And I think I have some stuff on the nuclear option later ahead. And I'm going to try to go faster because I'm afraid of time. So Axios actually reported that the Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation are actively pre-screening hundreds of pro-Trump force loyalists, quote, pro-Trump force loyalists, including recommendations for courts, agencies, and political roles, all vetted over with political ideology over merit. In 2025, there was a new wave of judicial direction, prioritizing nominees with strong personal loyalty to Trump, including Emil Bove, and I might be pronouncing his name wrong. I apologize to him if I am, and Whitney Hermendorfer. So over traditional legal qualifications, I'm going to go into each of these folks in a little bit more detail. Emil Bove basically is the Deputy Attorney General in the DOJ. He was previously the acting Deputy Attorney General under Trump from January to March of 2025. The background is that he was a high-profile attorney in criminal cases like the Stormy Daniels hush money, classified documents case, and prior federal prosecutor in responsible for terrorism and narcotics cases. Now, he was nominated for a lifetime seat in the U.S. Court of Appeals in the Third Circuit. He is accused of directing the DOJ to drop a corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams, triggering resignation amongst top prosecutors, which is their way of saying, I will not drop this case. I'd rather quit my job because this case is real, it has merit. And what I'm going to do, and this was a very polite, FU, if you will, to the Department of Justice, is that they all quit rather than say they would drop the case. Now, a whistleblower actually alleges that he suggested that the DOJ should ignore court orders and actually said, and I'm going to quote him, fuck you to the judges during a deportation plan meeting. So that is not professional behavior that should be at the highest levels of our judiciary system. We all get mad, don't get me wrong, we all get mad, but if you're in a courtroom, it should have a level of respect that he was not affording. Now, allegations are under Senate inquiry. Democrats view him as too politically loyal for a lifetime judicial role. Next is Tennessee's Attorney General's office. She was the director of strategic litigation unit in Tennessee's Attorney General's office, leading conservative lawsuits targeting the Biden administration's policies on LGBTQ rights, reproductive health, and federal education directives. And she was nominated to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, the American Bar Association raised concerns about her limited litigation experience, no jury trials or Supreme Court arguments, and under required years of practice. Advocates, including the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, opposed her nomination, citing her history of defending anti-civil rights and anti-LGBTQ legislation. So, I guess you have to decide whether or not everybody has equal rights in this country. And civil rights say we should all have equal rights in this country, regardless of the color of our skin, our sexual preference, how we were born, and how how we identify. And those rights are now at odds with someone that could be on, a very high court of law because she's a political loyalist. Now, people are chosen for what is called the originalist interpretation of the Constitution, which is a limiting of expansion of rights. But actually, I don't think that that's actually an accurate statement because we talked about how free speech is what's being squelched, right? And so if you're an originalist, you should be saying, oh, free speech all over the place. We need to let everyone speak their minds. These people want to say Gaza is like innocent victims and, let them protest, right? That's what America's all about is peaceful protests. But then when you shut down peaceful protests and you take billions of dollars away from the institutions of higher education that allowed peaceful protests, you're basically saying you don't want to allow peaceful protests. And I got very upset under, with the Occupy Wall Street movement because those settlements were shut down very violently, right? And, by force. And those were peaceful protests. Now, was it in a public space? Yes. But was it over a big deal? Yes. It was over Citizens United, which is the legalization of bribery in our country. So we had another event on Citizens United, so I won't go into it in detail. Let me just see where someone's not on mute.
iPhone 96.
Thank you. So deregulatory philosophies that favor business over federal oversight are also preferred under the judges in Project 2025. The Federalist Society's judicial model seeks to cultivate a legal environment where the Chevron defense, which lets agencies interpret the law, is overturned. And today, the agencies are allowed to interpret the laws as they relate to their agency. That's why they are an agency, because their purview is the Federal Consumer Protection Bureau, et cetera. Like they're supposed to, like decide what's right for their section of the law, basically. But this is basically saying that they should all be beholden to the president. Now, social and environmental regulations are struck down as unconstitutional overreach. The budget's indirect role is gutting the EPA, HUD, and DOE,
Damn you.
giving out. Steve, I don't know if you meant to be off mute, but please wait for the Q&A at the end. So basically leaving less policy to defend in court, and then it creates legal voids that have to be interpreted by conservative courts, shaping the precedents. So it sets the financial foundation and governance philosophy while Project 2025 operationalizes it, replacing legal staff. Let me just see. Don't have some of my regular folks that can do. Where's Will? All right, I'll just try to manage it myself. So
Sorry, Garrett, for interrupting. If you want, I could help you there.
yeah, let me make you a co-host. Thanks, Dan. So the bill's section 70302 states that no court of the United States may enforce a contempt citation for failure to comply with an injunction or temporary restraining order if no security was given when the injunction or order was issued. That's a quote from the bill. So what this means is unless the person suing doesn't put a lot of money up front, the court is not allowed to actually use federal funds to enforce contempt, which means if the president, say, does something illegal, say he shoots someone on Fifth Avenue, which he bragged that he could get away with, say he shoots someone on Fifth Avenue, then the court says, you need to show up in court, and he just decides, you know what, I'm not going to show up to court. The only thing the court can do is put him in contempt of court. But if the person suing him did not put up a large sum of money up front, what this says is that the court has no power to actually make him come to court and actually get a just and speedy trial. It says he can just ignore the court because the court has no ability to enforce their own rulings, which is very, very bad, people. This means the judiciary is losing its most powerful way to make someone follow the law. And it's in this bill.
Isn't this unconstitutional?
A lot of this is unconstitutional. And the irony is that it's the originalists that are, the supposed originalists, which are the supposed fiscally conservative party, which, to be fair, they haven't been fiscally conservative in my lifetime. It's the Democrats that have been fiscally conservative in my lifetime. Um, so I like to joke, there's the tax and spend Democrats, and then there's the don't tax and spend more Republicans, and that's really where we're at right now. So I'm looking for fiscal conservative. As a centrist, I want fiscally conservative. I want to actually work towards paying off our deficit so that we don't have this huge interest payment that we have to pay every year. We can reinvest that money back into society. And we did another event on the budget and how we could actually get closer to balancing the budget and actually ending up with a surplus. So if anyone wants to watch that, check it out on YouTube. It's on our YouTube channel. So this imposes a new work requirement on SNAP recipients. Now, I'll mention Jess talked about this. I generally agree with this. This is one of two things that I generally agree with. I think the idea that someone should get benefits without working doesn't make sense. Now, if they have no ability to work, meaning they're handling childcare or something like that, or and there is an exemption that if someone is not capable of work, that they don't need to get the SNAP benefits, but that they at least have to volunteer or work at least 20 hours a week to receive SNAP assistance. I think that makes sense. However, and this is a big however, I think that the government should also be putting social workers out there to talk to these people and say, look, you need this assistance, and please just volunteer for 20 hours a week. Why would you not want to do that? And have a conversation with them. So this shouldn't be a place where we say, look, we're going to put this restriction on and we're going to save money by not giving these people health care. What it should be is a place where we say, look, we want a work requirement because we want you to feel like you're contributing to society. It can't feel good to be at home, sitting and taking government money to feed your family and not be contributing in some positive way to society. Someone who's doing that has a misunderstanding about how we all contribute to society in general. Like, even if you're just volunteering for a nonprofit, that will still count 20 hours a week. That's all the requirement says. So yes, we should have that. And I've been a proponent of that for a long time, for decades, saying that there should be a work requirement for welfare, for SNAP. There should be, okay? But we shouldn't get rid of people's care because there's a work requirement. We should be getting them to follow the work requirement and getting them to contribute to society. And I've long said that I think that the government should be an employer of last resort. The government has a lot of work they need to contract out. Hire contractors of the people that can't find a job elsewhere, give them job assistance and give them job training so that they can get a job in the free market. Give them coaching and mentoring. Give them the skills that they need to get an actual job in the free market. I'm a big free market advocate, but we need to, and so this is one thing that I'll agree with, but in spirit, but not in the way that it's being enacted, because there should be no cost savings for this. If we did it right, there would be very little cost savings, and I'll go into why they're not actually, I'll go into later why there's not cost savings for that. So next thing is farm consolidation. This one really frustrated me. So the bill shifts money away, farm subsidies away from small independent farms towards wealthy investors who are in tax subsidies on farmland. To put some numbers to this, the top 1% of the largest farms own 70% of US farmland and get 27% of total farm subsidies. That's 1% get 27% of farm subsidies. The top 10% of farms get 68% of subsidies. So $7 and $10 just about is going to the top 10% of farms, and the people who own those farms make $740,000 a year or more. 78% of the land in this, and basically what it's doing is it's shifting money from the small independent places to what are called rural opportunity zones. And 78% of the land owned in rural opportunity zones is what's owned by people that make 740K or more. So the US has lost over 10,000 farms between 2017 to 2022, selling for between 100,000 to $500,000. The farm operations over $500,000 in sales grew by 26,000, showing consolidation to wealthy investors who benefit the most from this bill. So ChatGPT estimated between 168 to 182,000 farms will go out of business in Trump's term if the bill passes, which is an additional 28 to 42,000 farms from Biden's pace, which is speeding up the closure of small farms, which I would argue is the opposite of what we should want to do. And quite frankly, it's the opposite of what conservatives should want to do, because by having diverse businesses, we have creative destruction. That's how you have new innovative businesses that are more out innovating the large guys. The large guys have scale, yes. They can put more money into things, but the small guys can be more innovative because they're more nimble. That's why the small and medium-sized businesses are the lifeblood of American business. So basically, one of the things that makes this really hard for the small farms is that because the subsidies go to anyone, they raise the value of the land, which increases the taxes, making it harder for them to stay on it, but also more attractive for them to sell to the big guys because now their land is worth more, so higher taxes, and it's more financially beneficial to sell. I would argue that farm subsidies should only be for small to medium-sized farms, which are having trouble competing with the scale of large farms, giving the smaller farms a tax advantage, but not giving it to the top 1% who don't need farm subsidies. In fact, I wouldn't give it to the top 10% because they don't need farm subsidies. Now, if their business was not profitable without accounting magic, which we're going to talk about accounting magic a little bit later, then I would understand it. But I don't see why highly profitable large farms should be taking farm subsidies from the federal government. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think it should make sense to anyone, especially not conservatives who believe in creative destruction. Next, utility and internet subsidy cuts. About 23 million low-income people could lose broadband internet access. This creates a vicious cycle of poverty because not giving them access takes away the very resource that could get them out of poverty and to become a high income earner and taxpayer. Right? The internet is magic these days. Geez, if you haven't used ChatGPT, please use ChatGPT. Ask it any question you want. Ask it for the sources. Always ask for the sources because otherwise it can make stuff up. But if you ask for the sources and then fact check it on anything that sounds suspicious, it's really powerful and it's really good at teaching you how to do things. We had another event in the FTI about how to find what your dream job is and how to get a valuable skill set doing it just with ChatGPT. And you can do that. And I really want to teach more people in, poor areas how to do that because they can get jobs. There are millions of jobs waiting for these people and they can get the skills doing it. I've gotten a lot of people be interns at my company that we've gotten jobs. We've gotten dozens of people jobs as software developers, as product managers, different areas in technology, which is my background. Next is clean energy subsidies will be slashed from utilities, making us continue to depend on fossil fuels. All fossil fuels, if you haven't read, according to the fossil fuel companies, will completely run out in the world by the end of this century. So we're basically going to lose the technology advantages in solar and wind. I just came back from Niagara Falls on a vacation with my family recently. We saw these huge windmills, right? Huge, probably mostly American technology windmills. And we're going to lose that advantage to other countries if we stop subsidizing wind and solar. And to be fair, wind and solar are starting to become more competitive without the subsidies. But it just doesn't make sense at this point when we know that climate change is a real issue and we know that fossil fuels are running out within the lifetime of a child born today, because they'll probably live to at least 100. Why would we do that? Okay, it's worse. If you want to be a job creator, cutting all these subsidies eliminates 830,000 jobs. It's the number of estimated jobs that'll be lost. The increased jobs in the fossil fuel industry, because there were some, under $100,000, 100,000 jobs optimistically. So the total job loss is about 730,000 jobs that will be lost because of the cuts to energy subsidies, clean energy subsidies. Next is defense spending increases. So this is another one where there's a vast increase in military spending, over $3 billion for missile programs and 500 million for hypersonic weapons. Now, the budget included $150 billion of increased spending on the military. Those of you who have heard me talk about the military budget, I believe it's very oversized. We spend more than the next 9 countries combined. That is too much money. That's called hard power, where you basically want to brute force scare someone into thinking you're going to destroy them. What we used to have was called soft power that JFK created, which was US aid. And unfortunately, Trump has completely dismantled US aid, more or less, and there's very little left of it. And US aid gave us a huge amount of soft power, which is basically influencing by doing the right thing. Hard power is influencing by threat of death. Now, do we as a country want to be known for influencing by doing the right thing, or do we want to be known by threatening others with death? Now, there are certain times where we need to defend ourselves, and there is one thing that I think is in this budget that's actually really good. It's called the Golden Dome, and what it's meant to do is combat anti-satellite capabilities from Russia and China. And essentially, Russia and China have, I know China does, and I think Russia does, have the ability to blow up satellites. Well, can you imagine if China invaded Taiwan, theoretically, the US, if we responded quickly enough, which I don't believe Trump would do, he'd probably be on the golf course and not able to get a call at the time, and literally waiting an hour or two would get Taiwan taken over, and responding immediately would actually save Taiwan in game theory simulations. But let's say that happened, and our military satellites were all blown up. Well, we wouldn't be able to effectively defend Taiwan without military satellites. So this is basically something that says, look, if we ever do get into a war with these authoritarian regimes, we want to be able to defend our satellites from those regimes. That makes all the sense in the world. Okay, there is some military spending that I absolutely support. This is one I support. But there's also a lot of problems if civilians lose satellite services. Let's be honest. How many of you would be able to make the last trip, 2 hours without a GPS? Anyone want to raise their hand there? All right, I couldn't, so I'm not raising my hand. Okay, we got one or two. So I applaud anyone that can, but I am very dependent on these things. I don't even have maps anymore because why would I need maps? Right? I have a GPS in my phone. I don't
I
need a
only
map
use
anymore.
maps.
So, that said, next thing, critical mineral industry loans. So this is a very interesting and murky subject. So the bill creates a $100 billion loan program designed to support domestic exploration, mining, and processing of critical minerals like lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite, and rare earth elements, which are used for defense, energy, and technology sectors. Now, the problem is there's no details on the loan criteria, who's eligible, how the loans will be given. And as a staunch believer in the free markets and creating the best solution, I don't see why we need to give $100 billion of loans without any criteria being mentioned when the law gets passed. They should have a plan, and I guarantee they do have a plan. They just don't want to show it to us because there's no way someone asks for $100 billion of loans with no plan, right? There's a plan. They just don't want to show it to us. And I would never give someone a blank check for $100 billion with no idea how it's going to be spent. So not a wise choice in my opinion. So now, of course, the criteria will be geared towards friends of the administration. We know this, right? Because this is what Trump does. He rewards his friends and he penalizes his enemies, quote unquote enemies. I'm not an enemy of Trump. I actually care about Trump deeply. I want him to be a happy person. And I don't think he is a happy person. I think he's a very unhappy person. But I don't know if that's going to happen in this lifetime. So he's going to need extra ones to try to get it right. So that said, what I really want is for people to see that this bill is based on a lot of misunderstandings. And I don't think that the people who wrote the bill know all the implications to what they're doing. I think they're following political ideology blindly. And so I really am hoping that someone will talk about the implications of this bill to the people that matter. And hopefully someone here will talk to some, make phone calls to members of Congress that are on the fence on this bill and try to get it killed in the House. And then I'm going to give you a way to do that a little bit later. So next is healthcare cuts. So Medicare and Medicaid spending, there are supposed to be basically there's going to be stricter Medicaid eligibility rules. It's going to block some Medicare and ACA expansions. It limits coverage for non-citizens and repeals long-term care staffing regulations. Now, the Medicaid spending cuts are estimated at around 800 to 850 billion dollars, which will result in 10 to 11 million fewer people covered. The ACA marketplace and chip is part of a $1.1 trillion cut, which will create millions more uninsureds. The work eligibility requirements will have hundreds of billions of dollars by reduced enrollment and administrative churn. The total healthcare savings is about 800 billion to 1.5 trillion claimed in this bill. Significant, but let's talk about it a little more. So the Medicaid work requirements. So the bill states that Medicaid funding, let me go, I already covered that. Let me go to, so Medicaid funding, I already covered that, work requirements make sense. But it will, right now it's estimated that there will be a total increase of uninsureds by about 16 million people by the end of the 10-year period of accounting. Now, work eligibility requirements basically introduces more stringent rules. We covered this one. Now, I also I found this one a little bit hypocritical. So essentially what they do is they create more bureaucracy where you have to have a heavier administrative burden. And I thought Republicans were the small government party, right? Small government, which means fewer administrative burdens. But really what they're doing is they're putting in so much red tape that millions of people will lose coverage because they just don't want to go through the red tape. And that's not a party of small government. Let's be honest. Like that, if we're honest with ourselves, that's not a party of small government. Now, if it was, I'm just going to assume that they, they wanted to actually help people, but like, the red tape is not the way to help people. The way to help people is to coach and mentor them into free market roles and give them the job training that they need. Now let's look at the economic costs of this number of uninsureds. So essentially from lost productivity, and I'm going to go into each of these in detail, lost productivity and consumption, about $150 billion lost. The SSDI I'll just say that the total estimated annual cost is about $450 billion. So lost productivity and consumption is basically uninsured individuals and their families lose work days due to illness, care responsibilities, and presenteeism, meaning they're not going to work when they're sick, which leads to economic losses estimated at about $250 billion annually. The Social Security program dependencies of SSDI and SSI, when insured individuals become disabled due to untreated conditions, they often turn to SSDI or SSI. This disability system currently spends around $200 billion a year, and loss of coverage increases demand for those programs for chronic untreated illnesses that escalate. Next is state and local tax revenue declines. Uninsured workers earn less because of health complications and fewer hours, reducing tax contributions. Estimated this at about a 5% drop in earnings from $30,000 a year. Each uninsured person reduces payments by $1,500 in state and local taxes. Long-term health deterioration costs is about $102 to $204 billion. This is where, because you don't have health insurance, you delay care, which creates chronic illness, which increase healthcare costs in the long run. So conditions like dementia impose $200 billion in direct costs and $250 billion in unpaid caregiver costs. Speaking of which, the caregiver burden and ripple effect is the value of unpaid family caregiving is about $240 to $522 billion a year, which includes lost wages and emotional stress. Career disruptions and absenteeism cost another 17 to 33 billion. And so essentially, while we're claiming savings in cutting healthcare costs, we're not looking at all the costs that cutting those healthcare costs create. So that's not really a fair budget look. You have to look at the pros and the cons of a cut, and you can't just take the cut and take credit for it while you cause twice as much damage over there while you're cutting over here. That shouldn't be proper accounting. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about who deals with the proper accounting and what happened. It's pretty scary stuff. So the optimistic view is that the savings actually incur $370 billion of expenses per year. The healthcare alone will cost $3.7 trillion. The savings is about $300 billion of expense, 370 billion in expenses. The healthcare alone will cost 3.7 billion in expenses in a place that Republicans are claiming savings. So they're literally losing $10 for every $1 that they're saving, quote unquote. Now, it may not all be going direct to the federal government, but it is impacting us as a country. And if we want to think of ourselves as Americans, which I understand that the Republicans are the party of patriotism, at least they feel they are, if you're a patriot, you want to help your whole country. You don't only want to help the federal government's, what's it called, report card, right? And say, oh, I saved here, but it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. Next is introduces an increase in number. I'm going to go into immigration changes. So basically, as we discussed in our event on immigration, we don't have enough qualified people. We need immigration. And Section 7, and I'm going to go much quicker now, makes it much harder for immigrants to come here legally. Now, if we don't have enough people to fill the jobs that employers want to fill today without immigrants, and we make it harder for immigrants to come, and immigrants usually have to prove that they are doing a job that there was no American that could do. A lot of immigration visas require that. That's an H-1B, which is a common immigration visa, and you have to prove that no American could do that job, which there are lots of jobs where there aren't enough Americans to do them. So this makes it harder for immigrants to come here legally. So the per person cost of Trump's budget. So basically, the net national impact is about oh shoot. It's basically about shoot. Let me look at so essentially if you look at the true cost shoot, let me look at okay, the claimed savings is about 300 to 500 billion dollars a year. This is what Trump's budget claims. They used to claim that the added cost was 2 to 3 trillion dollars and that the savings were 300 to 500 billion, creating an annual cost per person of about $1,000, $1,300 per person. However, when I did the analysis, the subtotal that they used to say was $15 billion or $15,000 in additional debt that we would be taking on because of the Trump bill. Now, the healthcare cut impact is $13,690. The jobs lost from green energy are another $1,200. These are per capita, per person numbers. So the actual economic damage to the debt of this bill is $30,000 per American. To put that in context, the current official reporting is 1,200, whereas actually when I calculated the real numbers, we're talking 30 times almost what they're claiming it, what they were claiming it, what they're claiming it is after the accounting changes. So I'm going to go into the accounting changes in a minute. I think I have a slide on that. Basically, the current national debt per capita, each of us technically owes about $100,000 for being a U.S. citizen in national debt. Now, the current deficit per year is about $5,550. So this $30,000 increases our country's total debt by about $30,000. Not again, not directly, but the equivalent of impact on the economy, because some of this is in the private enterprise. It's not public numbers. So I don't want to say that it's all public debt. It's not, but the impact on the economy is hugely negative of this, tremendously negative, if I can use a Trump term. It's tremendously negative on the economy. So, next thing, impact on American households. Basically, this was given to me by Nancy, and I think it's a great chart. It basically shows that when you take all of the effects of the the Trump bill, I'm calling it the Trump bill, but the big ugly bill, is what I'd like to call it. The lowest income earners making on average $22,000 to $23,000 a year are losing $1,500 in taxes, government funding, support, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas the very wealthiest of the wealthy, and you can see this is a very clear gradient. The poorer you are, the more you lose with this bill. The wealthier you are, the more you gain. And this is the opposite of what we should be doing at a time of our country's probably biggest socioeconomic disparity in our history. We should be doing absolutely the opposite of this. But this is what's on the table to be voted on by Republicans, by House members of the House, in the next couple of days, probably. So,
this is not a mistake, Garrett, or an oversight.
I hope you're wrong, but I will say
Thank
that,
you, Sherry.
yeah, I will say that the bill will add 2.4 trillion to the federal deficit at a minimum. It could add as much as 3.4 to 5 trillion over the next 10 years, which is what the government uses for estimates. Now, a new thing was passed that will make this bill look much cheaper than it actually is. And what they're doing is they're hiding the accounting costs by saying that the Trump tax cuts, which were temporary, they were supposed to be temporary, which is why probably they passed, because they agreed that they would be temporary. Now what they're doing is saying, because those tax cuts already exist, extending them doesn't cost us anything because we've already cut we've already cut that money. However, this has two big problems. And essentially, if anyone remembers creative accounting from Enron, that's what we're dealing with right now in our US government. And it's about cooking the books. And essentially, what this is going to do, if we use this as a precedence, is that the actual cost increases of our deficit will never be visible to us as the public, because the government is going to be saying it costs one thing, but the actual cost on us as citizens is totally different. And so every expenditure is going to start out as a temporary expenditure, and it's going to look inexpensive. And then people say, oh, well, there's no big deal to pass that. It's just a 1 year blip. But then before that year passes, it's going to be passed as permanent. And it's also going to look like there's no big expenditure because the temporary one was already there. So actually, it's going to basically allow the government to spend huge amounts of money without any accountability to the public. Now, you would think that there should be someone that can stop this. Well, guess what? There was. Her name was the parliamentarian. The parliamentarian said, is supposed to be an objective person in the Senate, and they call out the politically motivated aspects of legislation, and they try to prevent these types of things from happening. The parliamentarian is a Republican because they're appointed by the majority leader, which the majority is Republican in both the House and the Senate. So the parliamentarian is a Republican, and they actually were objective, and they objected to the accounting change. However, the Republicans, in a very rare incident, this has only happened a small number of times, they voted to overrule her, and they basically are going to claim that this bill costs less than $500 million, when actually it's at least 5 to 10 times more expensive than that. Don't fall for it. This is not a cheap bill. This is a very expensive bill. In fact, doing the proper accounting doesn't even account for the major expenses. As I showed, it's going to be 10 times more damaging to the economy than it is than it looks on paper, even if they didn't have this accounting change, which they now do have the accounting change. So it might be worth noting that all the times parliamentarians were removed from their role for punitive reasons, it was by Republicans. And again, I'm an independent, but I looked up, was there a party line thing about when these parliamentarians get removed? And it was all of the removals that were punitive were by Republicans for punishment for being too objective as a third party. And they were actually they're able to be fired by the very person that puts them in place. There's really no democracy around the parliamentarian. It's like a good faith, I'm going to put this person in power and then I can remove them at any time if I want to, but it kind of looks bad for people who pay attention to politics. But how many people even knew there was a parliamentarian? I didn't know this until I started researching for this event, and I was like, how can this accounting change happen? Like, who allows this and who can stop it? Well, it turns out that it's very rare that people ignore the parliamentarians' advice, but in this case, they did ignore the parliamentarians' advice, and they moved forward with their claiming that the uh, oh, and by the way, the only time that the Democrats ignored the parliamentarian was when under Obama's term, the Republicans were using a filibuster to prevent any people from being added to courts and offices like offices in the government to try to prevent Obama from being able to govern successfully. And so the Democrats said, "Look, this is obstructionist. We're going to ignore it." And so they did. Um, Next is I talked about Trump as a figurehead. So what can we do about all this? So first, share this presentation with people. We only have a couple of days, but share it quickly. Second, call any friends you have with Republican representatives, and even feel free to call them yourself. They respond better to calls than they do to emails, to forums. Those are very personalist ways of responding. Call their office, flood their office, get everybody to flood their office. Look up who the Republicans are that are on the fence. I probably should have looked that up. Mea culpa, I did run out of time on this presentation. Call the representatives and say, vote no on this bill. The whole thing should be shot down. Like,
If you aren't their constituent, will they care that you called?
so they don't, I hate to say this, but I don't know that they have a way of knowing if you're their constituent. Like your phone number may be from out of town, but I wouldn't say you are or are not. I would just say, look, I don't think this bill should pass.
I
And
called mine today, Brad Sherman. They took down the information. They wanted your zip code, and I couldn't call DC because it was closed. And the girl said she would share my information of how I want them to vote.
thank you. Appreciate that, Karen.
Yeah.
So, there was also oh, here it is. There's also a phone bank to get involved that I'm going to put in the chat. And I see the chat has been very active, and I am not going to have time to read any of that. So I apologize if I'm not responding to anyone in the chat, but so this is something, a resource from someone else with Indivisible that's trying to stop the bill from passing. That said, I'm taking questions now. So, Jess, now is your time to raise your hand. We would love to hear from you. And Ginny, your hand first. Garrett, can you raise your hand digitally so it'll put you in line?
A moment.
No, just yeah, just look for it at the bottom. It's under React or right next to React. Cool, thanks. Ginny, go ahead.
Ginny. Garrett, oh my God. Over and over again, you choose such wonderful, important topics. I want to thank you, thank you, thank you. You do that over and over. Just amazing. And you do all this research, and that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Jenny. I have to give credit for the topic to Nancy. She was right that this was important, and this was the first time I could fit it in. I really wanted to do it sooner, but I would have had to reschedule people that had already been rescheduled. We had a scheduling issue, so I did it as quickly as I could. But I also honestly would not have been able to get this far in the presentation if I'd done it earlier. I did a lot of it this weekend on Sunday.
Okay. Thank you
And
again.
also things are changing very quickly with this bill. So
I know.
tried to get as up to
Yeah.
date as I could, but some of the things might be out of date because I researched it over a period of time. So Cherie, you're on mute, Cherie.
I know. Can you
Okay.
hear me now? I'm
Yeah, now
sorry.
we can hear you. No
My
worries.
computer was going cuckoo. Sorry about
That happens.
I'm amazed at your presentation. I'm a teacher, and that was, A plus plus.
Thank you.
I couldn't even get it all in. I was hoping that maybe we could get that to pass on because I do democratic
It
social.
will. It will go up on YouTube. I'm gonna try if I can get I have to see how late I'm gonna be up tonight, but I'll try to get it to my team member. If not tonight, then first thing in the morning. So we'll hopefully get it up within 24 hours.
Okay.
Your name?
It'll be under the Freethinker Institute channel. So subscribe to the Freethinker Institute channel on YouTube. Oh, thank you.
Nice.
I am so bad at self-promotion. I'm not a marketing guy.
Okay,
So
I will do that.
I'm going to share a little more information about the FTI, so that if anyone wants to learn more about us, including find our YouTube channel, learn more about the FTI here.
Yes.
We would love for you to learn about us and see if we might be a community you enjoy being a part of. I really want to particularly ask people who don't agree with me tonight to join the FTI because we need diverse opinions. That's how we think freely, is having diverse opinions. And so I think it's really important that we have a lot of different opinions brought forward. So I don't think it's good for any of us to live in an echo chamber. Karen, go ahead. You're
Karen,
on,
mute.
you're on mute, Karen.
Garrett, well, may I just real quickly just add to what I said earlier?
Sure.
I just wanted to add that my son was a political science major and got his graduate degree in public policy of renewable energy, blah, blah, blah. And he works for EDF right now. And I text him and I said, this is what Garrett is talking about tonight. I wish you could join us. And I told him he's just doing all these wonderful, important topics. So one of these days, my son will join in, I hope, and listen to you. That's what I wanted to also add.
Thank you. We'd love to have him. Karen, can you speak now? You're now not on mute.
Yes.
Great. Go ahead.
I'm caught on I'm caught off of this. I'm on your free. Okay, here we go. Hold on. Shoot. Okay. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. When you were covering health insurance, you had said something about Medicare, Medicaid, health cuts. And you basically just spoke about Medicaid, Medi-Cal. What Medicare cuts are they planning?
None.
Yeah, I don't know that there were. I'm not sure. Let me.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, Medicaid is for low income recipients, and Medicare is for everybody who's ever worked in the United States, after 65, everyone gets it.
Yeah, I don't think there were Medicare cuts at least not that I'm aware of. It didn't come up.
Okay, the other thing I'm having trouble with is I can get the group chat with everybody, but I can't see anything you're posting. And I also wanted to get your email so I could sign up for future meetings.
Great. Yeah. It's Garrett, Garrett at freethinkerinstitute.org. And if you email me
Wait. Oh, there it is.
I just put it in the chat. So if you see the group chat, Karen, you'll see the link that I posted has information about the FTI. And then I just put my my mail, actually you might have to use I think both of these will work, but you might have to use Garrett.Lang. So just send it.
I do the Medicaid, yes.
.Lang. Okay, hold on.
Do a screenshot.
My phone's not here right now.
Chat. Yeah. Oh.
Hold on, let me get it. Just if you can hang on there, please.
You
Yeah,
know
I
what,
think if you don't
Garrett, I
mind,
can't find your, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I can't find your, I'm looking on the chat and I can't find your email account.
let me
I'll give it to you. Are you ready?
Oh, okay.
Karen, Karen.
What? No,
no, she's looking for mine, I think. Cherie,
I'm looking for Garrett. I'm not looking for yours. I know yours.
Cherie, if you look in the upper right hand corner, you can also get it from Nancy because you guys are related.
Well, that's true. I could get
Yeah.
it from Nancy.
If you
And I'll
look at
give
the
it to you
top right
too.
corner, you'll have a list, like my name will be there, and if you click on it, I just sent it to you directly as well.
I
Oh,
see.
thank you. Appreciate that.
Yep. Farah, can we have you go next?
Oh, do
Yes,
you mean me?
hi, I'm here. Thank you for
Oh.
this. It was very insightful. And again, hello.
Sorry.
Okay,
Thanks.
I have a basic question, and pardon for my ignorance, but I haven't really studied the process in a long time. So I understand this is the bill and what it entails. It sounds to me like though it's like either all of it, like it's gonna pass with everything in it, or it's not going to pass and then nothing comes true. Like, can't they like negotiate and take some parts out and like adjust it and
They can.
or they
So
can't do that?
they are actually doing that, like kind of they were doing it up until today. The Senate was making last minute changes to it. And so both the Senate and House can make changes, but if one side makes changes, the other side has to agree to them. And so
Mhm.
the House sent it to the Senate. The Senate said, all right, well, we're going to make these changes. Now they're sending it back to the House to get approved. And if the House
Mhm.
approves it, then it goes to the president to sign. If he vetoes it, which he would not do on this bill, but if the president vetoes it, then you need more people to approve it. But if the president signs it, it becomes a law. And so the only people that get to add and remove stuff are members, are elected representatives. So that's why I was saying to call the elected representatives and say, vote no on this bill for as it stands. If they sent it back and they said, oh, instead of creating, millions of homeless, tens of millions of homeless people, we want to house the people that are actually homeless today, I would support the bill 100%, right? And if they said, oh yeah, I want to build the Golden Dome and I want to create these work requirements, but I want to put some budget in to get social workers to actually make sure people actually work those hours instead of losing the healthcare, I would support this bill 100%. But this administration is not doing those things. They're doing the opposite. They're doing things that, quote unquote, save money that actually cost us more money than they save. They're just not accounting for, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're not cognizant that it is costing them more than it's saving them. I don't see why someone would do it other than like plain cruelty. And I have a lot of friends that are Republicans and Trumpers. They're not cruel people. So I just want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And I think it's important that we don't dehumanize each other and assume that people have bad intentions. We should always assume people have the best of intentions until it's absolutely clear that they don't.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah, please.
So here's kind of what I'm thinking. I try to think strategy. So do you think that some of these things that Trump put in there are purposefully outrageous? Because there's like he'll know, I'm sure he knows not everything would get passed, but for the few items that he does really want to get passed, he puts the crazy ones out there so people focus on those, so then his other ones get
That
less
is his
attention.
style. Yeah, that's
You know
what
what
the
I
art
mean?
of the deal says to do is create such an extreme position that when you get halfway in the middle, you won the argument, right? You won the negotiation. That's what the art of the deal says, and that's his book. Although the guy that wrote that for him said that he regretted doing it, I think. But that said, that is his strategy. That's what he did with tariffs. That's what he does in general. But in this case, like if this bill passes, he's like it's all happening, right? And if the bill doesn't pass, and right now, like it has passed the House and it has passed the Senate, but not in the same form. It's passed both of them though. And so the only question is whether the House agrees to the changes that the Senate made. And if they do, then the whole bill passes. So, this isn't one of those cases where Trump can unilaterally just say, I'm going to, create a crazy tariff, which, by the way, he was never legally allowed to do that in the first place. He didn't have the legal authority to make those tariffs. Like, and that's another story for another day. We covered tariffs another time, and I didn't know about the legal authority argument.
Oh yeah, he doesn't have that.
Yeah, he didn't
I
have the
agree
authority.
completely. He doesn't have the legal authority. It's a bit complicated because it's covered by a series of laws, and the
Yes.
president does have the power to raise tariffs on some things. But not in
Let's
the
not,
kind of
Garrett,
broad.
let's not go too much onto the tariffs because that's not the focus for tonight.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right about what you're saying. And thank you for adding it. And I forgot to say when we're in the Q&A portion, everybody's welcome to do what Garrett just did and speak up. Just keep it to under 30 seconds, and then each time you raise your hand, keep it to under 2 or 3 minutes each time you raise your hand. You can ask as many questions as you want. You just have to raise your hand separately for each one, unless nobody has hands up, in which case go to town. So yeah, so that's how we do it. And that way we get conversational, right? So each of you can respond to anyone that speaks up, whether it's me or someone else. We can have it be conversational, even in a large group, if people just feel comfortable jumping in with a 20 or 30-second conversation topic. And that way we can have a conversation about each topic raised for each hand. Did that answer your question, Farah?
Yes, thank you so much. I think it did, and I'm just gonna sneak it in there. If you want to answer, you don't have to. But I'm wondering, Elon seems so pissed about this, and I'm trying to figure out
Well,
why.
Elon is probably a fiscal conservative, and he probably thought Republicans were fiscally conservative. He probably, he's a very busy guy. He works crazy hours and, apparently takes lots of drugs to be able to do it. And I work crazy hours too. I don't take any drugs. But he probably, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt too and say that when he got into the Republican fold, he thought they were fiscal conservatives. I think he's probably a socially liberal, fiscally conservative guy. And I think he realized once he got in there, and I also think that he thought there was going to be a lot more fraud and corruption in the government and a lot more waste in the government than he ended up finding. And so when he didn't find it, he had all the Republicans really mad at him, like, why didn't you find it? Why didn't you find it? He had a misunderstanding, right? He thought there was lots of government corruption and fraud. It just turned out that there wasn't. And the times that he said, here's the fraud, everyone goes, no, 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 that's not fraud. That's real dollars. And these are the people whose lives it affects. And he started looking bad, and then he started backing away from things. So I think the whole Elon thing, look, I've gone back and forth on Elon. Like, I didn't like that he bought Twitter and put Trump back onto it because it gave Trump another bullhorn. And I think he has too many bullhorns already for the things that he says. But yeah, I would say that's probably what's happening is he thought that they were fiscally conservative, and then when he learned that they weren't, that they were really more interested in a redistribution, but a redistribution instead of from the wealthy to the poor, like Robin Hood, he's taking from the poor and giving to the wealthy.
Yeah, that's trickle down economics,
Yeah.
and that
Doesn't work.
the Republican Party's not been fiscally conservative since Reagan.
Yeah. And I don't even know that Reagan was, to be honest. I don't think
No,
he
he
was
wasn't.
very fiscally conservative.
I meant when he
Came
when I mean
into
Reagan, I mean his presidency forward.
pre
Mm-mm.
okay. Well, I don't think Reagan was very fiscally conservative either. He had pretty high spending levels.
No, I mean he
You mean
began the
before
trend
him?
basically.
Okay,
So
he began the non-fiscally
yes.
conservative. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Eisenhower, I thought, had a great tax rate, which is now like Eisenhower was a Republican. His tax rate for the very wealthiest was 90 something percent, but the effective tax rate was about 50%, which basically said a dollar for me, a dollar for you, which sounds very fair to me if you're one of the wealthiest people. And the truth is, studies have shown that happiness is equal to the logarithm of the amount of money that you make or you have. And so actually over $100,000 USD a year, you get very little happiness for more money. So all these tax benefits for the wealthy, they don't make them any happier. It's just giving money to someone who doesn't even get happier and taking money away from people who get much less happy because the money goes away from them. Because up until $100,000 USD, more money does make you happier. So we're literally giving this money away to people who it's not even going to help. It's literally not even going to help them. And so, this is where I think Republicans, I don't think they realize this. I don't think they've done the studies of happiness because they're not benefiting from this, right? It's simply just a plain old bad idea. So Deborah, go ahead. You've been very patient.
Oh, no problem. First of all, I'm gonna join. So you have these meetings every Tuesday? I'll
Every
ask you that.
Tuesday evening.
Okay.
Yes, we
Anyway,
cover.
but what I really wanted to say was I'm an economist and I'm a college instructor, and I am all of us are really trying to. I haven't talked about this bill. I'm not teaching right now, but like here's a policy, what's the effect of this, but we're all trying to educate people and let people know what you were saying, like, okay, maybe but what you're going to do over here, like you can't have say people have to work but then you're not giving childcare, right? Because then
Right.
they're going to spend all their money on childcare working, and again, who's going to, then they're not
Yeah.
going to do
And
it,
then
right?
that's why
So I just
yeah.
say, so we're trying, and I talked a lot about tariffs and why it makes prices go up and what's going on, so we are trying to get that out. You're nicer than I am. I think the people at the top, the very top, know exactly what they're doing and exactly what this bill is going to do. And I don't think they care. I don't think they want to hurt people. They just don't care as long as they get theirs. That's my opinion. But the other people kind of under them, or most Trump voters, I think just don't understand it. And so we need to educate. And then my other question is, this is a budget bill, and technically it's supposed to be about the budget. But that thing you mentioned about the courts, that's actually in the bill, right? And the other thing about putting in their loyalists in the jobs, that's also in this bill, because it's weird it's in a budget bill. And okay,
The
basically
loyalist thing
it's
is not the thing they say out loud, right? The loyalist thing is part of Project 2025. The thing that's in the bill is preventing the judges from being able to um uh I'm forgetting the name of it.
right, but that's actually
Yeah,
in this bill. The
that is in
rest of
this
it
bill.
isn't, but that, as you said, is
Right.
key.
Yeah.
And so basically it's saying that the president can be a dictator, that he can ignore the Constitution, which sets up checks and balances. Is it constitutional for Congress to pass a law that says that no one has to follow the Constitution, or that the president can ignore them, as he has to talk to them in the Constitution? And do we expect to see litigation about that?
Yeah.
But who's going to enforce it?
That's the
Do
problem
we?
is that's the problem and the bill doesn't legitimately say he's going to be a dictator. What it's doing is it's slowly eroding the powers of the court and making it harder and harder over time for the courts to enforce things. And so eventually the courts will become only courts for the lower people, meaning not the wealthy, ruling class. And so the idea is, and I think this is I think part of the what I understand, part of the theory that goes behind the 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 Heritage Foundation's like work is that as a wealthy person, they feel the wealthy people are the ones that are the most fit to govern, right? And so they feel like the wealthy should be the ones calling all the shots because we're the most financially successful. What they're not realizing is financial success is only one dimension of success, and there are many other dimensions of success. And I do think that they don't realize that this money is not going to make them any happier. I think they
Song,
will
Bobby.
make
So,
them happier.
so
Oh, I don't think
I
they
do
care.
want to
Do
say
you
after you've
expect, I'm
given,
sorry, I just want to say, do you expect to see court challenges to the inconstitutionality of this?
I do. And we'll see whether or not the courts can uphold that. I forget the recent Supreme Court thing that kind of was a bad sign. But our Supreme
Right.
Court is very conservative right now, like to the extreme. Literally, even before it was this extremely conservative, they said that giving money is free speech. And
Yeah, no, it isn't. Yeah.
I can
And trickle
quickly
down economics never works, by the way.
well, I can quickly defund the entire US government with that argument. If, clearly free speech isn't taxable, right? How could you tax free speech? It's not taxable. Well, if giving money is free speech, every one of us, when we pay our employees or we get paid by our employer, that's just free speech. So it's not taxable. So there, I just defunded the entire US government with the Supreme Court Citizens United decision. So, the whole idea is nonsense. And the problem is our Supreme Court is, we did another event on the Supreme Court and we talked about how the Supreme Court has taken huge bribes and there's no accountability and there's very little. It took, a lot of pressure for them to even create an ethical rule set, and they're not even holding themselves really accountable to it.
So I do want to mention this about the courts just quickly.
Yeah.
That part that you mentioned has been taken out by the parliamentarian in the
Which
Senate
part?
bill. The court bill. So what it would have done is it would have you would have had to raise a bond,
Right.
basically.
Right.
And that was taken out.
But didn't they
Did it
ignore the
stand?
parliamentarian?
Did it stand, or did the parliamentarian request it be taken out and was ignored?
No, I do not believe in that instance. But I could be wrong. But based on what I've read, it was taken out.
Okay.
Otherwise,
I'll
there would be a
fact check it.
filibuster.
You
could
can't
be wrong.
filibuster because they've done the nuclear option. So that's the problem, is there's no more filibuster. That's why the filibuster made a lot of sense, but with the nuclear option, you can't filibuster.
We'll see when the bill comes out, but I'm
Yeah. Well,
pretty sure it was taken
hopefully
out.
we won't. I'm
Hopefully
still
it won't,
optimistic,
but it
even though it
probably
looks
will.
bad. I'll have hope until there's absolutely no hope left. Thank you. And that was just your quick comment, Garrett. Did you have a question that you wanted, or a question?
Oh, yeah, I do have. I thought it was a good presentation.
Thank you.
I do have questions. And I don't think that you touched on them, but you went into. I mean, I just what is the origins of this executive unitary? I mean,
Executive theory comes from the Heritage Foundation, and so that's the Project 2025 group. And so someone actually told me that the Thule Society was the equivalent of the Heritage Foundation during Hitler's time, right? The Thule Society was like the organization behind Hitler. He wasn't a part of it, but a lot of his higher ups were part of it, that were promoting anti-Semitism and a bunch of the other things that Hitler ended up following into. And so there, Trump is not like the driving force behind all this. He's the figurehead. He's really not the one doing most of the work. Like, I don't think he's capable of doing all this kind of work. So yeah.
yeah, I just because I do like law. I often have the question. So you mentioned in the 2025.
If you don't mind, because there are a lot of hands up, could you put your hand down and then raise
That's
it
fine.
again?
This is
Yeah, I want to give Jess a chance.
that was the major question. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Feel free to raise your hand again, and we would love to hear from you. Jess, I've been waiting for you.
Yeah, I just had a question. Do you have a specific example of how, I guess, the government is taking money from the poor and giving it to the rich? I want to understand that part.
Yeah, I do. Let me share my screen again. So this is the slide. Did you get the link, Jess? Can you access this slide deck?
I can, but I was looking for like where the information came from, not what's on the slide.
This is from the Congressional Budget Office, and it's from Hearst TV as the ones that put it together. Sorry. So yeah, this is compiled. It's been pretty publicly circulated, and it looks at all of the different impacts of the budget on different people at different socioeconomic strata. Can I say, Jess, if you fact checked this and it turned out to be true, would you be against this bill?
Maybe. Well, here's what I don't understand. I mean, I think everything we talk about is not one-dimensional, right? So, for example, people say, oh, the rich get away with this and that. But if you think about it, the rich are taxed the most out of everybody already. True. We're just talking about income taxes. But if you're rich and you're a business owner, now you're paying 12.4% of every single employee's wages, right? Because you have to match their Social Security, you have to pay their Medicare, you have to pay their unemployment taxes. So that's 18% of all your business income that you have to pay. And then you're also paying sales tax on the customers that you charge to sell your items to, right? So you have to pay sales tax. And then there's all these other taxes that nobody else is subject to except income tax.
Employers don't pay sales tax. Consumers pay sales tax.
Right. Consumers pay, you collect, you give it to the government, right? It's your duty to collect.
Well, you're a pass-through, right? You're a pass-through. As a business, you're a pass-through. You're not paying sales.
But what I'm saying is there's all these other taxes that business owners pay that I don't think get into, like, people don't take into consideration.
Oh, no, they're definitely taking into consideration. That's what policy analysts do, and economists like Deborah do, is they look at all of these different taxes and what's the impact going to be. Yes. And, so they're definitely taken into account. The thing is that as an employer, we hire people who are productive for us so that we end up getting a return on investment, right? And the taxes are there to provide social services. So if you appreciate having police to uphold laws, if you appreciate having a military to prevent foreign invasion, if you appreciate having a fireman put out a fire at your house, all these things are paid for by taxes. Most of the free world also has healthcare for their citizens. We do not. But I would argue taxes should do that.
If you're making 40,000, you're paying 12%. If you're making 60,000, you might be paying 20%. If you're making, you know what I mean? That's why
if you're Elon Musk, you're paying a little under 2%.
Is that fair? If you're Elon Musk, you're paying under 2%.
Yeah, because they have all these things that they can put money into. That isn't, I'm sorry. They have all these ways of putting money in another way that you can take advantage if you're richer. So Warren Buffett, as a percentage of his income, actually pays a lot less than his secretary.
You mean because he gets business deductions? He's still paying. He's still in the 45% bracket.
No,
now,
and it's not 45%.
No. That's different. Everyone
doesn't pay on wealth
if they have a business.
That's the key difference. He can pay income tax, but he doesn't pay on wealth tax.
That's wrong.
Yeah, but I think that's the big misconception, and I don't understand it because if you're $40,000, if you're making $40,000 a year and you rent, you're not going to get the benefit of getting a property deduction. One of the things in the bill was the change from SALT taxes from $10,000 to $40,000 because if you live in the city of Chicago like I do, your property taxes are well over $10,000 a year, and we don't get to write it off because it's capped at $10,000 right now. And if the bill passes and you are a homeowner, you get to write off all your property taxes. And if you buy a car that year, you're also going to be able to write off the sales tax that you paid on the car. Right. That's something that everyone benefits from.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jess, and I have no problem with the SALT tax being increased. Like, I think that if the bill only had that in it, I would be fully supportive. The problem is it has all these other things that I went through tonight. And if you look at the net impact on people, it's basically taking money from the poor and giving it to the rich. And that was the slide that I showed you. And I really encourage you to fact check it, Jess, because I know you have good intentions. I know I'm just channeling you, and I feel like you want fairness and you want to do the right thing by everyone. You're acknowledging that employers do pay a lot of taxes. All I would say is that we pay low taxes compared to most of the free world, and we don't have a lot of social services compared to most of the free world. And, that's the OECD basically. So that said, I want to let Deborah go. And Garrett, by the way, I want to say Garrett Wilson was correct that the Senate removed that point about holding people in contempt, which is nice. Deborah, go ahead. You're on mute.
Sorry, that was really, really troubling to me. So I don't mean to bring up another topic, but because of all this, what do people think about the possibility, like our governor has talked about, of Californians not paying tax, although they would probably come after us, but or
It would
something
create
like
a
that?
revolution. It would create a civil war essentially. And
No.
California's not going to
So?
win a civil war.
Yeah.
I
I'm not saying I
understand.
wouldn't. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I understand why you don't. Why people in California don't like it. California has become a punching bag for the GOP, but at the same time, there are points of no return, and that would probably be one of them. That would make it a lot worse, in my opinion. Even though this is a terrible bill, that would be worse.
Well, if they've taken the court thing out, I do feel better about it, because I still am against it, but at least if you take the court thing out, then there's a possibility for suing and something to be done about it.
Right.
And we
it
haven't
is
lost total political power. It hasn't
correct.
totally gone to a dictatorship.
Correct.
But the Supreme Court, they've already voted on it. I mean, they keep giving him more rights. So how can you take that out?
Well, what's happening is we're getting the executive is getting more and more rights, and he is able to pull off more and more. Like this whole bullying of colleges and universities because they want to allow free speech. Like that would never have been allowable in any other political environment. But right now it seems to be being ignored by a large percentage of people, right? Peaceful protests get squelched by billions of dollars of funding being removed for punitive reasons, basically, and then you have all the people in the government or all the liberal arts in the government being defunded because, well, they're liberal arts and they're not conservative, right? So it's,
which is not what we need, because we don't have enough workers to do high-tech jobs. So we need to, in a sense, invest as a society in education so that people are trained. So, for example, maybe we don't need as many immigrants, but I just mean because what happens is our economy is losing manufacturing, and folks, that's not coming back. I don't care what Trump says. That's gone, but we're getting other kinds of high-tech jobs, but then people don't get educated for the high-tech jobs.
Yeah.
So then we have more unemployment. You need to help those people get the jobs that are there, and then the economy can grow. Okay.
No, I agree. I don't like to defend Harvard. I mean, it's some of the bigger Ivy League places.
You must be from Yale.
But you can't deny like the attacks on some like Columbia or Harvard, and it's like it's awful and it's punitive against individual universities.
Yeah, and I don't like everything the universities do, and wokeness has gone too, I mean, there's arguments, I get it. But, and I don't agree with a lot of what the protesters are saying, but so what? They still get to protest.
That's what free speech is about.
That's right. They get to protest, and you don't take them off the street or silence them for that, and you don't punish the university, no.
Who started talking about woke, though? That to
I
me,
did.
No, but I'm saying I don't buy this crap that conservatives say that if you're liberal.
Tree, I'm going to ask you to just use polite language.
Sorry. I thought I was in my own group. Forgive me about that.
It's okay.
No, I'm just saying, what is this about woke?
I agree with you there. I mean, is there things gone too far in cancel culture, and is it there? Yeah, but is it everybody, and is it the overwhelming thing going on there? No. I don't know anyone teaching. I don't even know what critical race theory is. I don't know anyone who's teaching.
Deborah, go to our YouTube and watch Critical Race Theory. I learned a ton doing the research for that event, because I didn't know what it was very well either, and the things that I read in the news made me think it was bad. And when I actually researched it, it's not bad. It's actually very logical.
Well, but I mean, acknowledging other people, but I'm just saying, I hear from them, they're teaching this, and they're saying all of our kids should be trans. I mean, just all this stuff, and I'm like, where are you getting? Why are people? No one is saying that your kid should. No, I think your kid should change. No one is saying this.
People who are saying that. and there have been excesses, a few like really
Of course there are. Yeah, exactly.
You know, and I mean, and I think that they're painting a broad brush, basically.
There
And
are
it's
also
not what's really happening.
right. The problem is that what we did when we talked about DEI and when we talked about critical race theory is the very people who criticize DEI and critical race theory actually support the core tenets of DEI and critical race theory. The
Of
things
course.
that they're criticizing are actually straw man arguments of both of those things. They're not
Right.
criticizing the actual movements themselves. They're criticizing the criticisms of the movements, which are not actually a part of the movements. And so this is where I say that I think people are well intentioned. I don't think conservatives are bad people when they say get rid of DEI. They think that DEI is getting rid of a meritocracy and they believe in a meritocracy. But the
No,
whole
right. That's not
yeah,
true.
the whole point of DEI is to create a meritocracy and say we need to protect, every member of society so that there's no racism in the hiring process. That's what DEI.
And I just want to tell people I'm from Los Angeles. I drove around because of where I work. Part of the street on Alameda was closed during those big protests. But what you were seeing on the news about, oh my God, that is not, it was like 3 blocks that I didn't see any violence. And I live here and there was no, I'm just saying, this is propaganda because I saw it. There was nothing.
There was
one of my professors, his son lives in not
Garrett, just give
Alameda.
Jess
He
a
lives
second.
out.
Garrett, Jess was speaking before you, if you don't mind. Give her 1 second and then you can go.
I was just saying that we were getting off topic. We were supposed to talk about the bill, but Dan had his hand up for quite a while. I think like 7 minutes. Could we hear from Dan?
Where's Dan?
Yeah, he's right there. Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
your hand went down, Dan. Why don't you
No, because
because
we heard we were hearing some good stuff, and I just wanted to. What I wanted to say was 2 quick things. I really appreciated hearing from Jess. I appreciated hearing from Jess is what I just said.
I agree.
And the other thing is that the other thing is quick question here, because as you know, I'm Canadian, right? And I was wondering, is it by design that there's only 2 parties in the States, or are there other parties, and or do you think that would be beneficial to have more parties? And I'm sorry if I move this thing sideways.
It is a little sideways. I'm going to answer quickly my opinion. There has always been 2 parties because then no one else really had a chance of winning. And what ends up happening is if someone is more, let's say a new contender that's an independent is more aligned with Republicans, say, well, they make it less likely that the Republican Party nominee is going to win. And so having third party candidates has historically been more harmful to the major parties than helpful. And they never had a chance of winning because most people, like a very large percentage of people, vote party lines. So the problem is, and the problem is that we don't have forced rank voting. And forced rank voting, or ranked choice voting is also called, is what we need to allow a third party to be able to have a chance, because then people can say my first choice is this person, but my second choice goes to this of the 2 major parties, and then there are no votes thrown away. And there is literally no possible situation where forced rank voting will with like clarity of what someone is voting for. There's no possible way that forced rank voting will come up with a worse outcome. It's absolutely better. The problem is the only people that can get us forced rank voting are the 2 parties, and they stand to be the ones that lose their 50-50 chance of being in power. So we as the people need to demand forced rank voting, and we have been doing it like state by state. There have been movements to get forced rank voting. New York City uses forced rank voting. In fact, I think the election would have gone differently if they had not. But anyway.
All right, I appreciate that. Thanks, Garrett.
Yeah.
I would just comment, there are minor parties. So there is the Green Party and the Libertarians. And they do have some officials on the local level. I think the Libertarians in Arizona and the Green Party in like Oregon and Washington. But not, I mean, I don't mean state, I mean just local in terms of county and city. So, but there's no chance of them winning statewide or even federal.
No, I appreciate that, Garrett. The reason why I brought it up is because Elon Musk said that he's gonna fund a third party, something, right? And I thought
that's for state and local, probably state elections for Congress. He's trying to get rid of all the Trump loyalists, which is actually a pretty, pretty good thing to want to do, in my opinion. I think Trump loyalists are not healthy. Just being blindly loyal to anyone is not a healthy situation. We should all be thinking for ourselves. That's why we're the Free Thinker Institute. Teach people to think for ourselves. Like I would never tell any of you to trust my judgment over your own. I want to help you improve your judgment if I can, but you have to be convinced of that, right? And so ultimately, we all have to be the decision maker of what we do. Even if you cede power to someone else and you decide to vote for them and make them your representative, you are making the choice to cede your power to them, right? And whatever decision you make, you're the captain of your own ship.
Yeah, so, it kind of lends itself to opposing views. Like I want to hear someone who's outside of my, I guess, outside of my echo chamber.
Exactly. And I hope Jess will bring friends next time, because I want to hear more diverse opinions. And we haven't had a huge diversity of opinion. I was hoping we would have more pro bill people here to help me understand if I missed anything. Like, did I misunderstand something? I might have misunderstandings too. I did spend a lot of hours researching, and I tried to look for, I'm very good about not prompting for hallucinations. Like, I ask open-ended questions, and then I use AI pretty effectively, and I ask open-ended questions. If you tell I got two looks like you don't understand what I'm saying. When you use AI, if you say, show me this is true, which is basically feeding your confirmation bias, basically trying to reaffirm your beliefs, it will sometimes make stuff up that tells you that it's true because it wants to please you. I don't use it that way. What you have to do is say, what does this bill say about, like homelessness, right? And then the AI will answer you like what the deal is with homelessness, and then you can say, well, what are the other implications? If those people are homeless, what happens to the crime rates, and what are the other negative implications of people being homeless? And it'll come up with a big list of stuff. And so you have to ask it open-ended questions, not try to force an answer out of it that you want to hear. And that's true with human beings too, by the way. Garrett, you have your hand up, and then Farah, and then we're gonna shut down because we're at 9.
I have well, this is about so this is just a specific bill. So in the bill, it's specifically when it got to renewables, the tax on renewables. So I read that, and initially I was, opposed to that provision. But as I've been thinking about it, I still wouldn't vote for it if it was presented to me and I was representative. But I think there's a fair argument to say, well, we've had renewables, many of them have been around for like 20 plus years. The tax has been in place 2003. And so opening up this for taxation, right, and allowing the government to get revenue, might, I think, be a good thing, because other, fossil fuels are taxed. Oil, etc. I think, what would you sort of say to that, I suppose?
What do you think is not taxed about renewables? Renewables are still taxed. The only difference is that there's a subsidy, meaning that the government creates a financial incentive to use renewable resources instead of fossil fuels. And so all I would say is that if we want to, eventually wean ourselves off of the fossil fuels before they absolutely run out and we have a very terrible adjustment period, and we want to be leaders in the renewable energy world, we should be investing in renewables, not running away from renewables. And so we should have a financial incentive to use them. But renewable, like the energy produced from renewable energy is still taxed. It's just that there's a subsidy given to people who invest money in renewables. So that way more investment will be put into renewables, which means that we get more solar and wind and geothermal, not much, and hydro, not much, but mostly solar and wind. And actually, you mentioned that this has been in place for 20 years. Well, if you look at the price of solar and wind, the price of solar and wind have gone down, down, down. These incentives are working really, really well. and the number of houses using them is really good. In fact, I'm looking at putting in a heat pump, which uses the air or ground to heat and cool your home, so you don't have to rely on the energy grid, which reduces the amount of energy you use either for fossil fuels heating your home or air conditioning, electricity for cooling your home. And actually, because of the incentives, it's actually more profitable to use the eco-friendly version that puts less strain on the power grid, which is a smart thing to do because that puts less strain on the power grid, which already has a lot of trouble.
Okay, you answered my question.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
No problem. Great question. Farah, go ahead. You're the last one tonight.
I found the silver lining. There's no taxes on tips.
Yeah, there is. That's a good point. That one I think is actually good. Although there was some
Tips and overtime.
yeah, tips and overtime. There was some downside to that. I forget what it was, but yeah, I overall I think that's good. That
Don't
was one
stop
that
tipping,
actually
everybody.
The downside is our fiscal responsibility in
right.
terms of
Well,
taxes.
the thing is, we shouldn't be taking the money for people who are taxed and working overtime. Those are the people that are not making a lot of money usually. So, the real and what I want to say is true. And one of the things people said is that the majority of taxes are paid by the wealthy. All I would say is that taxing the wealthy more doesn't decrease our happiness. So it's actually okay to tax us more because you know what? If you tax us more, it doesn't hurt our happiness and you actually can give the money to the people who need it instead of giving the money to the people who don't need it. And the
Are
problem,
you wealthy?
I'm not too bad off.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, that's a complicated question. So, um, but
I think the problem with that is I don't think anyone has any issues. Anyone who has money, I don't think they have any issues paying more taxes if they know that it would go to good causes. But the
I agree.
problem is the way that it gets dispersed, we have so little control over that. I mean, in
I
Chicago, it's
agree.
ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah.
I certainly didn't pay to bring all these immigrants to my city and have them sleep in police stations. I didn't pay for that, but that's what they did with my money, you know?
Right. And in fact, there was a great thing that was done. I think it was in Finland or Norway. And what they did is they took the homeless and they bought them all flats. And it was actually cheaper for the government to buy every homeless person a one-bedroom flat rather than pay for them to be temporarily housed. And so they literally solved their homeless problem by doing exactly what I said, is housing the homeless and giving them a place from which they can build a life because most homeless people are not choosing to be homeless because that's what they want to do. Like very few people are actually choosing that. They just are in a bad spot, had one or two bad decisions that were very big bad decisions, and now boom, they're homeless and they have no way to recover from that. And I would argue, I think you're right, Jess. I think that we the people, and I will say the one silver lining for me is of everything that's going on in our country right now is it's creating a much more engaged population and we've been very apathetic in this country about politics for a long time. A lot of people have, and this is getting people to wake up. And I hope that we wake up in time to prevent, the possibility of losing our democracy, which I think is a very real possibility. And so we need to stay active, stay vigilant. I think that there's a lot of effort to be being made on the side of people in government to create so much chaos that people just want to give up. Please do not give up. Like we need to fight for this democracy. We cannot give up. We need to be more persistent and more vigilant. And just to your point, we need to make sure the money is spent well. Because I may take issue with saying that most wealthy people would like their taxes to go up. I think a lot of people would rather have their taxes be low, but a lot of people would also not mind the taxes going up if they knew it was spent well. And I think that with proper education, that you would be right that the majority of wealthy people wouldn't mind taxes going up if they knew it was spent well.
Yeah. I mean, and then somebody was saying earlier about the woke stuff. I don't think it's wokeism that people frown upon. I mean, and I'm speaking from somebody who's been a Democrat my whole life. You know, I've been a Democrat. I mean, if you live in Chicago, you're taught and trained to be a Democrat. You don't know anything else outside of that. But you know, I'm somebody who was homeless and I was on Medicaid, and I'm also an immigrant who was not a citizen. So all these issues are very close to me at heart. Like I've lived through it. And
Mhm.
speaking from experience, like you can turn your life around. This is the only country in the world where if you really put your mind to it and make an effort, you can turn any situation around. And I just don't know how many people really understand or appreciate that, because maybe they weren't homeless and maybe they didn't have to be on Medicaid, you know? So like me being pro for the bill, I think a lot of the reasons are I see that it can change the trajectory of where we are going. I think that if we don't vote for some extreme change, and change sucks. Nobody likes change. I mean, I'm sure all of us have worked at a big company and you never thought you would get laid off and you got laid off. Like shit happens, right? But if there's not any extreme change soon, I feel like this country will really go to shit, and it won't be the American dream that it once represented. I mean,
I hate to tell you, Jess, but the American dream is actually somewhat DOA right now. If you look at the social mobility of the US, you look at a country that is not quite known for its social mobility like England, right? Where there's like practically a caste system in the education system starting at age 12. And we have something similar here with our property taxes, but we have less social mobility than they do in the UK. There's more social mobility there. So the American dream is a great dream. The problem is, and I agree with you, Jess, I think that the country will go to shit if we don't fix it. But I think that this bill is actually making it worse by making cuts that actually cost more than the cuts save. And I think I showed that tonight, and I had the evidence to back it up in the slide. So take a look at that, because that just doesn't make sense, right? Why would you cut off your right arm if you're a laborer, right? Like it doesn't make sense to cut off your right arm and basically make a cut that's going to cost you more money than the savings, like by 10x. And there were two examples of that. So, let me move. So yes, thank you all for coming. Thanks for the diverse conversation. Really appreciate everybody's comments and questions. And thanks for showing up. Keep showing up and keep asking questions. Please, if you don't like this bill, reach out to the link that I put in the chat and try to join the phone bank. And hope to see you guys next week. I forgot.
Before you leave, how do I join? Just tell me where to go to join.
Good night, Garrett's daughters too.
Good night. Post the link.
To join what, Deborah?
To join your group and come every week. Do I go to Meetup?
Yeah, go to Meetup and send me a message on Meetup, and I'll send you the link for everything.
Oh, okay.
If you need it, you can ask me too, Deborah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I just wanted to get it before we left. Okay.
No problem. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Good night. Good night. Thanks for good discussion.